Why is Palestine so important to you? And why did you go to the actual International Court of Justice to observe South Africa's case against Israel?
Palestine's always been important to me. I joined Defend Palestine in 1977, which is a while ago. And I think there were two great injustices in the world which resonated with my generation when I was young. And I guess it resonated with my generation, particularly because the British were particularly responsible for them in many ways. And one was South Africa and one was Palestine. And I joined both the anti-apartheid movement. I think I joined the anti-apartheid movement in 1974 when I was, I'm happy to say, a schoolboy. And I joined the Friends of Palestine in 1977. And of course, we eventually did manage to defeat apartheid in South Africa, but we haven't yet defeated apartheid in Israel. And the Palestinian movement has always been very, very important to me. I should say that it's quite fashionable to be pro-Palestinian suddenly at the moment, and I absolutely welcome everybody, no matter how late they've come to the issue. I'm delighted. I never thought we would see public opinion in the United States turn around to become basically pro-Palestinian. That's something I never thought I would live to see, and I think the writing is now on the wall for Israel. But I want to make one thing absolutely clear, which is that I'm an anti-Zionist. I do not believe in the existence of a state of Israel. I don't think there should be a state of Israel. I think there should be a single state of Palestine from the river to the sea, and everyone should be free to live there, including all the Jewish people who are there at the moment. I'm very happy for them to remain, but everybody should live in a single democratic state, which is blind to race and religion, which is a proper democracy, and that's very much what I support. And I also support, without reservation, the Palestinian right to armed resistance. As an occupied people, they have a right to armed resistance. So I think people say they support the Palestinians, but get terribly upset anytime the Palestinians ever fight back. We can do without.
Speaking of which, you actually got into trouble. You were detained in October over some statements that you made related to this. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I was detained under the UK's Terrorism Act. I was detained at an airport, and I think it was probably over statements I made supporting Palestine's right to armed resistance. Although it wasn't plain, I was actually coming back from a WikiLeaks Assange meeting in Reykjavik and flew into Glasgow airport. And the questions I was asked were kind of 50-50 about Palestine and about WikiLeaks. So exactly what they were after, I'm not sure. But I should say there are many journalists who have been detained under this same legislation. And you'll find this quite shocking, I think, that you can be detained at an airport or at a seaport under the Terrorism Act, and you have no right to remain silent. You have no right to a lawyer. You must answer fully any question put to you. You must give up any electronics you have, and you must give up all passwords on those electronics. It's the most draconian piece of legislation, which removes absolutely all of your rights. And it was an immediate post 9/11 piece of legislation. And the justification when it went through Parliament was it was to stop people at airports who they believed had just planted a bomb on a plane. That's why you had no right to remain silent and had to answer questions, etc. But what they've started doing increasingly is using it against journalists. And it's been used, I know personally 5 or 6 journalists it's been used against in the last year or two. It's been used against Kit Clarenberg of the Grey Zone.
Another former guest.
Another former guest.
No, yeah, not to brag.
Used against Joanna Ross, formerly of Sputnik Radio in Edinburgh. It's been used against Vanessa Beeley. It's been used against, basically people like yourself would be quite liable for this to happen to you if you come to the UK. It's been used to attack the alternative media under anti-terrorism laws. I mean, the police don't actually believe I'm a terrorist. It's purely an excuse to And what they asked me about, which was also Kit Clarenberg's experience and Joanna's experience, what they asked me about primarily was funding. Where do I get money from? Do I get any money from Russia or any other foreign power? If not, where does my money come from? Do I know where other people get their money from, etc.? Do you know how the grey zone gets funded? That kind of questioning. And it's extremely worrying.
And tell us why you're running for parliament.
Well, I'm running. I mean, primarily I'm running because of the genocide in Gaza and because of the so-called opposition Labour Party. Much like the United States, you have two main parties, both of which actually support Israel, support arms supplies to Israel, and support practical support to the genocide, support complicity in genocide. So I decided to run against them. But it's also wider because, again, like the United States, we have two right-wing parties. We have two parties whose economic and foreign policies have no substantive difference between them at all. In fact, there are many ways in which you could say that the so-called more left-wing party, the Labour Party here, or the Democratic Party where you are, some of their policies are more right-wing than the Conservative Party. And we've had, for example, debates where Keir Starmer, the leader of the Labour Party, has been promising to be tougher on immigration than the Conservatives, and to support the notion of flying asylum seekers to Africa and dumping them there, provided, he said, it can be done within international law, as opposed to saying that that is an absolute dreadful thing to do to poor people who are already in a terrible position. So there is no real opposition. There really isn't. And we need to give people a chance to vote for something that is at least a little bit different than the conservative nonsense of the main parties. And that's why I'm standing. I'd say probably out of a sense of civic duty might be a way to put it.
Were your politics always like this, or did you become radicalized?
Well, I don't view myself as radical at all. I think I used to be a member of the Liberal Party back in the 1970s, and I don't think I believe anything now I didn't believe then. But I've stayed still while the entire mainstream political landscape has moved rightwards past me at enormous speed. And now, for a sort of bog standard liberal, I'm on the extreme left of politics for believing in things I always believed in, but were quite standard things to believe in the 1970s, and now viewed as outrageously left wing. But I've known George since 1977. I think I've known George. George and I, stomped the streets of Dundee, collecting buckets for the miners' strike and that kind of thing. So we've campaigned. We have many things on which we don't agree at all. I'm very strongly in favour of Scottish independence, for example. That's not George's position. There are other things where we don't agree, but we've come together for Gaza. We've come together for Gaza and decided to put aside anything we don't agree on and to work together.
And were you always anti-Zionist?
Oh yeah, no, I think I've always been. I remember. I can't recall. I must have been 12 or 13 years old, and I watched a documentary about olive trees, which focused on Palestinians and the role of the olive in their culture, and these old Palestinian farmers. And the Israelis came in and just cut down and destroyed all of their olive trees and devastated their village, which was very emotionally affecting. And I saw that, I think when I was 12 or 13, literally, and that formed my view at an early age. Interestingly enough, it's a tactic which, for example, one of the reasons Afghanistan is so poor was it had very much a tree crop based economy based on fruits and nuts, which were vital to its economy. It was the main supplier of fruits and nuts to almost all of southern Asia and the Middle East in the 1830s. When the British invaded in the 1840s, they destroyed down millions of trees and ruined the Afghan economy in a way it's never recovered from since. So this is a typical settler colonialist tactic for dealing with the local people. And as a historian, it often interests me to see those roots of behaviors and recurring behaviors.